The clink of champagne glasses, the murmur of happy voices, the soft glow of fairy light strung across my backyard. It was supposed to be the perfect overture to the rest of my life. Our engagement party. Mine and Sarah's. And there she was, my fiancée, Sarah, looking like an angel in that white sundress, her blonde hair catching the golden hour light. She was laughing, a sound I thought I knew better than my own heartbeat. But tonight, something was off. It was a subtle dissonance in the symphony of our supposed happiness, a high-pitched whine just beneath the surface of the music that only I seemed to hear. She was standing with a group of her college friends, but her attention, her entire being, seemed to orbit around one person in particular. A guy I'd never met, but had heard so much about. Julian, she'd called him. My gay best friend. You're going to love him, Mark. The words echoed in my head, a cheerful, innocent pronouncement that now felt like a sinister taunt. Because as I watched them, as I saw the way her eyes sparkled when she looked at him, the way her hand lingered on his arm just a fraction of a second too long, a cold dread began to coil in my stomach. He wasn't just any guy. He was something else. The air crackled with a tension only I seemed to perceive, a terrifying premonition that the life I had so carefully built was about to be demolished, brick by painful brick, right here, amidst the celebration of its supposed cornerstone. My name's Mark. I'm a graphic designer, pretty successful, I guess. I'd always considered myself a decent guy, loyal, hardworking. Sarah and I had been together for 4 incredible years. For years where I'd woken up every morning feeling like the luckiest man alive. We met through mutual friends, a cliché coffee shop encounter that felt like something out of a movie. She was a marketing exec, ambitious, beautiful, with a laugh that could melt glaciers. Or so I thought. Everyone said we were the golden couple. Mark and Sarah, you guys are in-game, our friends would gush. We'd just smile, wrapped in our bubble of shared dreams and future plans. We just bought a small house in the suburbs, the kind with a porch swing and a yard big enough for a dog we hadn't adopted yet. The engagement wasn't a surprise. It was an inevitability, the next logical step in our perfect story. I proposed on a beach in Maui, sunset, candles, the whole 9 yards. She cried, said yes, and for a while, I was walking on clouds. Lately, though, if I'm being brutally honest with myself, there had been small, almost imperceptible shifts. Tiny cracks in the facade that I'd papered over with trust and denial. Sarah had been distant. More nights out with the girls, which increasingly seemed to include Julian. Her phone, once casually left on the coffee table, was now glued to her hand or strategically placed face down. Passwords changed for security reasons. When I gently questioned her, she'd laughed it off. Mark, you're being silly. Julian's gay for God's sake. He's like a sister to me. And I, like a fool, had accepted it. Why wouldn't I? I trusted her. The thought of her betraying me, betraying us, was so alien, so monstrous, it simply didn't compute. Julian was her confidant, her shopping buddy, the one who gave her brutally honest fashion advice. That's the narrative she'd spun, and I'd bought it, wholesale. I'd even felt a little guilty for my fleeting suspicions, chiding myself for being insecure. A gay best friend. What could be more harmless? The party was in full swing. My parents were chatting with their folks. My best man, Dave, was already 3 beers in and telling embarrassing stories about me to my cousins. I tried to shake off the unease, tried to plaster on a smile and play the role of the happy fiancé. I mingled. I thanked people for coming. I refilled drinks. But my eyes kept darting back to Sarah and Julian. They were huddled near the dessert table, heads bent close together, whispering. His hand was on the small of her back, a casual, proprietary gesture that sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated rage through me. I saw him lean in, his lips brushing her ear, and she threw her head back and laughed, a throaty, intimate sound that was nothing like the laugh she shared with me. It was a secret laugh, a shared joke that I wasn't privy to. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My champagne flute felt suddenly slippery in my sweaty palm. I needed air. I mumbled an excuse to my aunt and uncle and made my way towards the house, intending to splash some cold water on my face, to recalibrate. As I passed the open kitchen window, their voices drifted out, clearer now. Sarah's voice, laced with something I couldn't quite identify. Was it excitement? Or was it mockery? He has no idea, Jules. Absolutely clueless. It's almost pathetic. My blood ran cold. Julian's smooth, baritone laugh followed. Well, he's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, is he, darling? But he serves his purpose. My purpose? What purpose? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I leaned against the cool brick of the house, my breath catching in my throat. This couldn't be happening. This had to be a nightmare. Then, I saw it. Through the window, a clear view into the kitchen. Sarah had her back to me, but Julian was facing the window, a smug, triumphant smirk plastered on his face. He reached out, caressed her cheek, and then he leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly peck. Not a gay best friend kiss. It was a deep, passionate, lingering kiss. The kind of kiss a man gives a woman he's intimately involved with. My fiancée. Kissing her gay best friend. At our engagement party. The scene burned itself into my retinas, a grotesque tableau of betrayal. The world went silent. The music, the laughter, the chatter of our guests, it all faded into a dull, roaring tinnitus in my ears. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, each beat a throb of agony. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a public castration. She hadn't just cheated, she'd paraded her lover in front of me, in front of everyone we knew, disguised him as a harmless confidant, and laughed at my ignorance. I stumbled back from the window, my legs weak, my mind reeling. Clueless? Pathetic? Served his purpose? The words twisted like knives in my soul. Every memory, every shared moment, every loving gesture from the past 4 years suddenly felt tainted, a lie, a carefully constructed illusion. How long had this been going on? How many times had she laughed with him about my naivety? The humiliation was a physical force, threatening to buckle my knees. I could hear my own ragged breathing, harsh and loud in the sudden stillness of my mind. The laughter from the party, once a symbol of joy, now sounded like the cackling of demons. She was out there, right now, probably rejoining our guests, her face a mask of innocent joy, while I was back here, shattered, my world imploding. The engagement ring on her finger, the one I'd painstakingly chosen, the one that symbolized our future, felt like a brand, a mark of my stupidity. I stood there, hidden in the shadows at the side of the house, for what felt like an eternity. My initial shock was giving way to something else, something dark and cold. A rage so profound it was almost calm. She thought I was clueless? Pathetic? A tool to serve her purpose? The audacity of it, the sheer, calculated cruelty, was breathtaking. She hadn't just broken my heart. She tried to break my spirit, to humiliate me in the most profound way possible. The image of her face, radiant and laughing with him, flashed in my mind. No, this wasn't how my story was going to end. This engagement party, this monument to her deception, wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A chilling resolve settled over me. She wanted a show? She wanted drama? Oh, I give her one. She thought she was in control, pulling the strings, with me as her unsuspecting puppet. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The naive, trusting Mark was gone, incinerated in the fires of her betrayal. In his place, someone else was emerging, someone colder, harder, and infinitely more dangerous to her carefully constructed world. The night was still young. In the real festivities, I decided with a grim finality, we're just about to begin. The music from the party, that joyful, celebratory soundtrack to my personal hell, seemed to pulse in time with the throbbing in my temples. For a few more minutes, I remained frozen in the shadows, the image of Sarah and Julian's kiss seared onto my brain like a cattle brand. My first instinct was to storm out there, to scream, to expose them in front of everyone, to unleash the hurricane of rage and pain that was tearing me apart. But then, a different thought, colder and more calculating, slithered into my mind. A public meltdown would give her the stage, allow her to play the victim, to twist the narrative. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. The initial shockwave had passed, leaving behind a desolate, icy landscape where my love for her used to reside. Now, only a burning desire for, not revenge, not exactly, justice, a reckoning. She thought I was pathetic? I'd show her pathetic. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing a semblance of calm I didn't feel. I straightened my shirt, smoothed my hair, and composed my features into a mask of polite indifference. Walking back into that party felt like wading through thick, suffocating mud. Every smile, every congratulatory pat on the back, was a fresh stab of irony. I found Sarah near the bar, laughing with a group of her colleagues, Julian still hovering nearby, his arm casually draped over the back of her chair. The audacity was breathtaking. She saw me approaching, and her smile widened, that brilliant, false smile that now made my skin crawl. "Mark, there you are? I was wondering where you'd wandered off to." Her voice was honey-sweet, laced with feigned concern. "Sarah," I said, my voice surprisingly even. Could I speak to you privately for a moment? In the study, her smile faltered for a microsecond, a tiny flicker of something in her eyes. Annoyance? Or was it apprehension? Julian shot me a quick, unreadable glance. Of course, sweetie, she said, disentangling herself. Is everything okay? The concern in her voice was so perfectly pitched, it was almost admirable. Almost. Once inside the study, with the door closed, the charade dropped. What's wrong, Mark? She asked, a hint of impatience creeping in. You look like you've seen a ghost. In a way, I have. I replied, my voice low and cold. The ghost of the woman I thought I was going to marry. She frowned, a perfect little V forming between her brows. What on earth are you talking about? Are you drunk? Drunk on the truth, maybe, I said, my eyes locking onto hers. Tell me, Sarah, how long has your gay best friend, Julian, been your lover? The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked genuinely stunned, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. It was the first honest reaction I'd seen from her all night. Then, just as quickly, the mask snapped back into place. She scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. Don't be ridiculous, Mark. Julian is gay. I told you. Are you seriously this insecure? At our own engagement party. You're going to ruin everything with your paranoia. The gaslighting was so predictable, so textbook. Oh, I'm not paranoid, Sarah. I saw you. In the kitchen, kissing him. And trust me, there was nothing gay best friend about that kiss. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. She stared at me, her eyes wide, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crumble. You saw everything. I confirmed, my voice devoid of emotion. I also heard you. Talking about how clueless I am. How I serve my purpose. Enlighten me, Sarah. What purpose is that exactly? She sank onto the edge of the desk, her bravado deflating like a punctured balloon. The fight seemed to go out of her. Mark, it's not what you think. Oh, I think it's exactly what I think. I countered, the cold fury coiling tighter in my chest. You've been playing me for a fool. For how long, Sarah? How long have you been laughing at me behind my back with him? She started to cry then, big, theatrical tears. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to. Julian and we have a connection. I was going to tell you. When I pressed, unmoved by her tears. After the wedding? After you'd secured your purpose? After you'd humiliated me in front of my family and friends by marrying me under false pretenses? Her head snapped up, a flicker of defiance in her tear-filled eyes. Don't you dare try to make this my fault. Maybe if you were more attentive, more exciting. So this is my fault now. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You cheat. You lie. You bring your lover to our engagement party and introduce him as your gay best friend, and somehow I'm to blame. The door creaked open, and Julian himself strolled in, a concerned look artfully arranged on his face. Everything all right in here? I heard raised voices. He looked from me to Sarah, then back to me, his expression shifting to one of smug superiority. I see you found out. My fists clenched. The urge to wipe that smirk off his face with my knuckles was almost overwhelming. Get out, I said, my voice a low growl. Now, Mark, Julian said, his tone patronizing. Let's not be dramatic. Sarah was just about to explain. I said get out. I roared, taking a step towards him. For the first time, a flicker of fear appeared in Julian's eyes. He glanced at Sarah, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, then back at me. He gave a little shrug, a nonchalant gesture that spoke volumes about his lack of character, and sauntered out of the room, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my relationship. The immediate aftermath was a blur of raw emotion and logistical nightmares. Sarah alternated between tearful apologies, desperate pleas for forgiveness, and angry accusations. She tried to minimize it, calling it a stupid mistake, a moment of weakness. She swore Julian meant nothing, that I was the one she truly loved. Lies. All of it. The trust, the very foundation of our relationship, had been pulverized. I told her it was over. The engagement, the wedding, everything. She broke down completely, begging me to reconsider, telling me I was throwing away 4 years of happiness. Our happiness was a lie, Sarah. I told her, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You build it on deceit. The party, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the study, was still going. I couldn't face them. I couldn't face the pity, the questions. I told Sarah to get her lover and get out of my house. She refused, then pleaded, then threatened to tell everyone I was being abusive. The venom in her words, from the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, was chilling. Finally, exhausted and numb, I walked out. I left my own engagement party, got in my car, and just drove. I ended up at Dave's place, my best man. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and knew something was terribly wrong. I told him everything. The whole sordid, humiliating story. He was silent for a long moment, then just said, "That bitch." And that asshole. His anger on my behalf was a strange comfort. He let me crash on his couch, no questions asked, just a steady supply of whiskey and a listening ear. The next few days were a living hell. Sarah bombarded me with calls, texts, voicemails, apologies, threats, guilt trips. "How could you do this to us? You're destroying my life. Don't you love me anymore?" Her parents called, trying to mediate, urging forgiveness and reconciliation, clearly more concerned about the scandal and the lost wedding deposits than my shattered heart. My own parents were shocked, then furious, then incredibly supportive. They'd never fully trusted Sarah, my mom later admitted, saying there was always something off about her. Hindsight is a wonderful, cruel thing. Julian, predictably, went to ground. No smug messages, no provocations. He was a coward, just like I'd suspected. Sarah, however, was relentless. She even showed up at my office, causing a scene, crying in the lobby until security escorted her out. The humiliation was relentless. But with each desperate act from her, my resolve hardened. The pain was still there, a constant, dull ache in my chest, but it was now mingled with a cold, clear anger. She had underestimated me. She thought I was weak, pliable, clueless. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. I started to plan. Not a petty revenge, but a systematic dismantling of the life she thought she was entitled to, a life built on my trust and my resources. First, the practicalities. I contacted all the wedding vendors, canceling everything. The deposits were mostly non-refundable, a bitter pill to swallow, but a small price to pay for my freedom. I changed the locks on the house we'd bought together. Thankfully, it was solely in my name, a premarital asset. I moved her belongings into storage, a clear, unequivocal message. The engagement ring, a custom piece, expensive and symbolic, became a point of contention. She demanded it back as a part of her. I saw it as a symbol of her fraud. I consulted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman Dave recommended. She listened to my story, her expression grim. "This is more common than you think," she said. "But the audacity is notable." She advised me on how to protect my assets, how to handle the fallout, how to extricate myself cleanly and completely. I started digging. Not for dirt, necessarily, but for clarity. I went through old credit card statements, emails I'd archived, piecing together the timeline of her affair. It had been going on for at least a year, maybe longer. All those late nights working, those weekend trips with the girls. Julian's name popped up with alarming frequency. Dinners I hadn't known about, hotel stays in nearby cities. The depth of the deception was staggering. She hadn't just cheated, she'd been living a double life, funded in part by me. The purpose I served became sickeningly clear: stability, financial backing, a respectable front while she had her fun on the side. My lawyer drafted a letter to Sarah, formally ending our engagement and outlining the division of any shared items, demanding the return of the engagement ring. It was cold, clinical, and final. No room for negotiation, no emotional appeals. This wasn't a breakup, it was an eviction. As I signed it, a strange sense of powerlessness washed over me, quickly replaced by a steely determination. She had set the stage for a drama at our engagement party. Now, I was going to write the final act. She thought the exposure at the party was the worst of it? She had no idea. The real confrontation was yet to come, and it wouldn't be in the privacy of my study. It would be a careful, calculated move designed to show her, and anyone who still believed her lies, exactly who she was, and exactly what she had lost. The game wasn't over. I was just changing the rules. The letter from my lawyer landed like a bombshell in Sarah's lap, or so I heard through the grapevine, a grapevine that was now buzzing with whispers and speculation after her dramatic exit from my house and my subsequent disappearance from our shared life. The carefully crafted image of the perfect couple was shattering, and she was scrambling to pick up the pieces, trying to paint herself as the victim of a suddenly cruel and unreasonable fiancé. But the legal document, cold and irrefutable, was a different beast altogether. It didn't accuse or emote. It stated facts and made demands. The primary demand, of course, was the return of the engagement ring, not just because of its monetary value, which was considerable, but because of what it represented: a promise broken, a trust violated, a future stolen. It was a symbol of her deceit, and I wanted it back, not to keep, but to erase. Sarah, predictably, reacted with outrage. She called me, screaming, crying, accusing me of being heartless, of trying to humiliate her further. "That ring is mine. You gave it to me," she shrieked down the phone. I let her rant, my silence a wall she couldn't penetrate. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke, my voice calm, almost chillingly so. "Sarah, the ring was given in contemplation of a marriage that is not going to happen, a marriage you voided with your actions. Legally, it's mine. Send it back, or my lawyer will take further action. It's your choice." Then I hung up. No debate, no discussion. Just the cold, hard truth. My plan wasn't about a single, dramatic confrontation like some movie scene. It was about a slow, methodical unraveling of her deceptions, a quiet implosion of the world she thought she had so cleverly constructed. The first step was financial. We had a joint savings account, meant for wedding expenses and our honeymoon. It had a substantial amount in it, much of it my contributions. My lawyer advised me to freeze it immediately, which I did. The satisfaction of knowing she couldn't touch that money she was likely planning to use to cushion her new life with Julian, was immense. Then, I went through every financial tie we had. Gym memberships, streaming services, even a joint credit card she barely used but kept for emergencies. Severed. All of it. Each cut was a small act of reclaiming my independence, my resources. The next phase was social. The engagement party had been a public declaration of our intent to marry. The cancellation of that wedding needed to be just as clear, if not as public. I didn't want a messy, he said she said drama played out on social media. Instead, I opted for quiet precision. I drafted a simple, factual email. It went out to everyone who had been invited to the wedding, everyone who had attended the engagement party. It stated, very simply, that due to unforeseen circumstances and irreconcilable differences, the wedding was off. I thanked them for their past support and expressed regret for any inconvenience. No blame, no salacious details. Just the facts. The dignity of it, I hoped, would speak louder than any accusation. But for a select few, our parents, our closest friends, the ones who deserve the full truth, I was more direct. I met with my parents and explained everything, showing them some of the evidence I'd uncovered about the length and depth of Sarah's affair. Their initial shock gave way to a quiet fury on my behalf. My mom, who'd always had her reservations, just hugged me and said, "You deserve so much better, sweetheart." Sarah's parents were a different story. When I called them to explain, they were initially defensive, trying to excuse Sarah's behavior. "She's young, Mark. People make mistakes. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive her?" her mother pleaded. I calmly laid out the extent of the deception, the premeditated nature of it, the introduction of Julian at the party. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I don't know if they ever truly accepted it, but they stopped calling me to plead her case. The climax, if you could call it that, wasn't a screaming match or a dramatic public expose. It was a quiet, devastating moment of realization for Sarah. A few weeks after I'd sent the lawyer's letter, after the accounts were frozen and the wedding officially canceled, she agreed to meet. She wanted to talk things through, she said, to find a way forward. I knew it was a desperate, last-ditch effort to salvage something, anything. We met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop. She looked diminished. The radiant confidence she'd exuded at the engagement party was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed exhaustion. The designer clothes looked a little less pristine, her makeup a little less perfect. She tried to appeal to my emotions, reminiscing about our good times, crying, apologizing again, swearing she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. "I love you, Mark," she whispered, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled it away. "No, Sarah," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You don't love me. You might love the idea of me, the stability I provided, the life you thought you could have with me while still having Julian on the side. But you don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have been capable of doing what you did." She started to argue, to protest, but I held up a hand. "It doesn't matter anymore. We're done. The only thing left to discuss is the ring. Her face hardened. I'm not giving it back. It's a symbol of what we had. What we had was a lie, Sarah. And that ring is a symbol of your lie. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Not the engagement ring box. This one was different. I opened it. Inside, nestled on the satin, was a cheap, plastic toy ring, the kind you get from a gumball machine. This, I said, pushing it across the table towards her, is a more accurate symbol of the value you placed on our commitment. Her eyes widened, first in confusion, then in dawning horror and fury. How dare you? She hissed, her voice trembling. You think this is funny? No, I don't think any of this is funny, I replied, my voice still calm. I think it's tragic. You had everything, Sarah. A man who loved you, a future, respect. And you threw it all away for him? For cheap thrills and whispered lies in my own home. I then laid out the evidence I'd found, printouts of hotel bills, damning text message exchanges I'd managed to recover from our shared cloud backup before she could delete them. Screenshots of her and Julian's cozy social media posts from times she was supposed to be working late or with her sick mother. Not in an angry way, but in a factual, almost detached manner, as if I were presenting a case study. Her face went from red to white as she looked at the proof of her long-term, calculated deceit. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a look of utter devastation. The carefully constructed walls of her denial crumbled, and she saw, perhaps for the first time, the full extent of the damage she had inflicted and the full extent of what she had lost. There were no more tears, no more excuses. Just a hollow, defeated silence. Julian, by the way, I added, almost as an afterthought, seems to have disappeared. I heard his wife found out about you too. Apparently, you weren't his only extracurricular activity. Funny how these things work out, isn't it? This was a calculated guess, a shot in the dark based on his cowardly behavior, but judging by the fresh wave of despair that washed over her face, it hit the mark. He hadn't just been using me, he'd been using her too. The gay best friend was just a user, period. She finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, dawning regret. Mark. I'm so sorry. I messed up. I messed up so badly. Please, is there any chance? No, Sarah, I said, standing up. There's no chance. You made your choice at that engagement party, when you brought him into our life like that, when you laughed about my cluelessness. This is the consequence. I picked up the cheap plastic ring and dropped it into her lap. Keep it. As a reminder. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, amidst the ruins of the life she had so carelessly destroyed. I didn't look back. The real engagement ring arrived by courier a few days later. No note, no apology. Just the ring in its original box. Selling it felt like shedding the last piece of her, the final link to the lie. The money went into a new account, one solely in my name, a fund for my future, a future that no longer included her. Her downfall wasn't loud or explosive. It was a quiet, pathetic fizzle. She lost her fiancé, her home, her reputation among our mutual friends, and, it seemed, her affair partner as well. She was left with nothing but the consequences of her actions. As for me, the pain was still there, a dull scar, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace, of closure. The chapter was over. It was time to start healing, to start rebuilding. The cost had been high, emotionally and financially, but my self-respect, I realized, was intact, perhaps even stronger than before. She thought I was weak. She learned, too late, that even the kindest people have their limits. It's been 2 years since that catastrophic engagement party, 2 years since my world tilted on its axis and then slowly, painfully, righted itself. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of legal disentanglement, emotional wreckage, and the awkward process of explaining to well-meaning acquaintances why the wedding of the year was suddenly, irrevocably off. But time, as they say, has a way of dulling even the sharpest edges of pain. It doesn't erase the scars, not entirely, but it allows new skin to grow over them, tougher, more resilient. What happened to Sarah? Well, karma, as it turns out, can be a relentless accountant. From what I've heard through the ever-churning rumor mill, the one I try my best to ignore but occasionally catches snippets of, her life didn't exactly become the glamorous, exciting adventure she'd clearly envisioned with Julian. He, true to form for men of his ilk, vanished into thin air once the consequences of their affair started to rain down. Turns out my shot-in-the-dark comment about his wife finding out wasn't far off the mark. Julian, it transpired, was a serial philanderer, and Sarah was just another conquest, another notch on his bedpost. His own marriage imploded spectacularly, taking his comfortable lifestyle and a good chunk of his reputation with it. He certainly wasn't in any position to offer Sarah the grand life she seemed to crave. As for Sarah, without me to serve her purpose, her world shrank considerably. She had to move out of our house, of course. I heard she ended up in a small, dingy apartment on the other side of town, a far cry from the sunny suburban home we'd picked out together. Her career, which she'd always prioritized, took a hit too. The scandal, though I tried to handle it with discretion, had a way of seeping into professional circles. People talk. Reputations, once tarnished, are hard to polish. The last I heard, she was struggling, hopping between temp jobs, a shadow of the confident, radiant woman I thought I knew. There were a few attempts from her to reach out in the first year, a couple of late-night, tearful voicemails, a long, rambling email full of regrets and pleas for another chance. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness is a complex thing. I'd forgiven her enough to let go of the consuming anger, but not enough to let her back into my life, not even into the periphery. Some doors are best left triple-locked. And me? Well, the journey back from that betrayal was long and arduous. There were days I felt like I was drowning in cynicism, convinced I'd never trust anyone again. The pain of her deception, the sheer, calculated cruelty of bringing her lover to our engagement party under such a preposterous guise, left a deep wound. But I refused to let her break me. I threw myself into my work, and my graphic design business, which was already doing well, began to flourish. The focus helped, giving me a sense of purpose, a tangible measure of success that was all my own. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had rallied around me, whose loyalty had been a beacon in the darkness. Dave, my best man, was a rock, always there with a beer, a bad joke, or just a willingness to listen to me rehash the same painful memories until they started to lose their power. I also started therapy. It wasn't easy, confronting the anger, the grief, the feelings of inadequacy her betrayal had stirred up. But it was necessary. I learned to unpack the red flags I'd ignored, to understand the dynamics of manipulative relationships, and most importantly, to rebuild my sense of self-worth, which had taken a significant beating. I learned that her actions were a reflection of her character, not a judgment on mine. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to heal. I rediscovered hobbies I'd let slide, started working out again, even took a solo trip to Southeast Asia, something I'd always wanted to do. It was liberating. About a year ago, something unexpected happened. I met someone. Her name is Emily. It was tentative at first, on my part. I was cautious, guarded, terrified of making the same mistakes. But Emily is different. She's kind, genuine, and refreshingly honest. There are no games, no hidden agendas. She knows my story, the broad strokes of it anyway, and she understands the scars I carry. With her, I feel seen, valued, respected. It's a quiet kind of love, a steady, comforting warmth, so different from the dazzling, deceptive fireworks I'd experienced with Sarah. We're taking things slow, building a foundation on trust and mutual respect, and for the first time in a long time, I feel a sense of quiet optimism about the future. I did have one final, unexpected encounter with Sarah about 6 months ago. I was at a downtown farmer's market on a Saturday morning, enjoying the sunshine, when I literally bumped into her. She looked older, tired. The spark, the vivacity that had once captivated me, was gone. She was carrying a worn-out tote bag and looked like she hadn't slept well in weeks. When she saw me, her eyes widened and a flush crept up her neck. There was a moment of awkward silence. "Mark," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Hi." "Sarah," I replied, my tone neutral. There was no anger left, no bitterness. Just a strange, faint sense of pity and an overwhelming relief that this was my past, not my present. "You look good," she said, her eyes flicking over me, perhaps noticing the subtle changes. I was fitter, more confident, happier. "Thanks," I said. "You too." A polite lie. We stood there for another awkward moment, the ghosts of our shared history hanging in the air between us. Then she mumbled something about needing to go, and hurried away, disappearing into the crowd. I watched her go, and then I turned back to the vibrant colors of the market, to the life I was building, a life free of her shadows. That encounter, as brief and inconsequential as it was, felt like the final closing of a very painful chapter. She was just a person now, a stranger I once knew, a reminder of a lesson hard learned. Looking back, that whole devastating experience, as horrific as it was, taught me invaluable lessons. It taught me about the importance of trusting my gut, of not ignoring those subtle red flags. It taught me about resilience, about my own capacity to heal and rebuild. It showed me who my true friends were. And most importantly, it taught me what I truly deserve in a relationship: honesty, respect, and genuine, unwavering love. The betrayal almost destroyed me, but in the end, it made me stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of the authentic connections in my life. The path was dark and treacherous, but I walked through it, and I came out on the other side, into the light. And that light, I've come to realize, is far brighter and more beautiful than any illusion Sarah ever tried to sell me. And that brings us to the end of today's story. Thank you so much for tuning in. I truly hope to see you again for more fascinating tales ahead. If you enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our next adventure. See you soon.